Violent chaos on the streets of Hong Kong as police fire tear gas and rubber bullets at tens of thousands of protesters. Let's bring in CNN correspondent Matt Rivers now, who's live for us in Hong Kong. Matt, good evening. These tensions have really spilled over in the past few hours, but the protesters, they seem to be standing firm. Tell us what is happening.
Yeah, right now it appears that things are a little bit calmer than they were before, Michael. So we're right behind the police line. We're right in the middle of the financial district of Hong Kong. This is where embassies are. This is where major corporations are based. And protesters have essentially shut down the main thoroughfare through the middle of the city. So we're right behind the police line. And just down the road there, you can see that's the protester line. They've been forced back to that point after being driven away from the main legislative building earlier today. And things have stalled here, really, for the last half an hour or so. We've seen the occasional canister of tear gas being fired from the police just over my left shoulder here, and that has seemed to keep the protesters back, at least for now. But this can't last forever, obviously, Michael, and so at some point you have to figure that the police are going to do something if the protesters down there don't disperse. So maybe you call this the eye of the storm right now, but we're really waiting to see how all this plays out. This morning there were protests that largely were peaceful, but it was really around 4 p.m. local time that things really started to get quite tense. And since then, we've had several hours of reports of rubber bullets being fired, of some occasional use of water cannons, but the majority has seemed to be tear gas canisters, handmade tear gas bombs that have been thrown by the police. So that's where we are right now. Where we go from here, though, we're not sure.
Well, Matt, whilst there's that slight calm, just talk us through what these protests are really about and why there's been such a huge response on the streets of Hong Kong.
Sure. Well, it really started on Sunday. That's when we had protests that organizers said were in excess of 1 million participants hit the streets of Hong Kong. It's all about this extradition bill that would see Hong Kong pass a law that would allow China, mainland China, to extradite suspects here from Hong Kong to the mainland. What critics here are saying, protesters like the ones behind me are saying, is that that gives China the ability to use its notoriously opaque legal system to take advantage of maybe trying to get extradited dissidents, political activists, journalists, people who Beijing doesn't like. And they think that that breaks down the rule of law here in Hong Kong. Now, the Hong Kong government would argue no, it just closes legal loopholes and makes Hong Kong not a haven for criminals. But that clearly has not convinced these people. So on Sunday, you saw a very peaceful protest, larger numbers. Now we've seen protests today that have turned significantly more violent. But that's really the crux of this issue, at least for this particular series of protests.
And Matt, are we getting a good idea of the response from the Hong Kong government and the Chinese authorities on the mainland?
Yeah, so the mainland authorities have basically encouraged the Hong Kong government here and its chief executive, Carrie Lam. They encouraged this bill to be passed. And what the Hong Kong government is basically saying is that they're pushing forward with this bill. Now, there was supposed to be a second reading, a debate of this bill in the legislature today, but due to these protests, that was canceled, a short-term win for protesters. But still, the leadership here in Hong Kong, again, led by Chief Executive Carrie Lam, they have shown no signs of repealing this bill. And so if they don't do that, then the question becomes, well, how long can protesters keep this momentum up, and how long can they shut down essentially what is, a main artery here in Hong Kong?
Just before I let you go, Matt, just explain to me, if we can let your camera have a look around you, where you're standing, that sort of street that it is, and who's in the distance there?
Yeah, sure. So that's where the protesters are. That's the front line right there. That's where most of the protesters have been pushed back. And you can see there's probably several thousand people down there still at this point. And Mark, if you want to follow me over this way, basically this is one of the police lines here on the other side of the main road. And there are police all over. So on the other side, we're actually on an overpass right now. There's police down there on that other side. And if you look over this way, you can see, look at the buildings. I mean, this is the heart of Hong Kong. This is the heart of the financial district. This is where embassies are, big businesses. So this is happening in the heart of central Hong Kong, and that's why it's so disruptive here, and that's why you've seen such a large police response. They don't want a repeat of 2014, where protesters were actually able to occupy a vast part of this area for the better part of 80 days.
All right, well, thank you so much for giving us that first-hand report. Matt Rivers in Hong Kong, appreciate your time.
Thank you.